The 2023 Global Organised Crime Index has revealed that syndicates have positioned South Africa as a critical player in the transportation and distribution of illicit drugs. It comes as numerous multi-million rand drug busts have taken place, with 3 recorded in Durban's harbour recently. Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime Senior Lead on Drugs, Jason Eligh, joins us now to talk more about this. Jason, a very good evening to you. Good to have you on News at Prime. As someone who has followed these trends for quite a while, are you surprised that there's increasingly movement, or more movement, in fact, of illegal substances into and via South Africa?
No, not surprised at all. I think the recent seizures are perhaps opening a window for law enforcement and other observers to see the reality of the flows. But South Africa has been a large consumer of cocaine for a number of years. There are around 350,000 people who use cocaine here. So it's had a sustained flow of cocaine for some time now. And it's increasing its role as a transit hub, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years.
You mentioned the recent busts, for example. It's not uncommon to hear of a bust at one of the main international airports here in Johannesburg, OR Tambo International. And while those are significant, it makes you wonder if those aren't just decoys to allow perhaps the larger stashes to get through undetected.
Oh, it's certainly possible, but any drug trafficking organization don't want to lose product. So it's possible that you're looking at a lower level of movement when you have lower volumes. But South Africa has seen high volumes move through the country. We're talking about cocaine in the measurement of tons. And so I think it's possible, but unlikely.
And are local officials, including the police, responding effectively?
Well, it's a difficult task for law enforcement, isn't it? Because you're talking about organizations that are extremely well established. They're entrenched in countries around the world, including South Africa. They've corrupted institutions, including port facilities and other bodies that are responsible for enforcement. And just the sheer volume of the trade, right? Cocaine is at a global high in terms of production over the last couple of years. So there's even more cocaine today than there was in years past. And we're seeing business that is not business as usual. We're seeing a lot more cocaine, or at least we think we're seeing a lot more cocaine moving through Africa as a whole, and particularly exploiting South Africa and port facilities in particular.
And why are we seeing this trend with cocaine in particular versus other drugs?
Well, South Africa, if you think of the geographic position, it's a way. It's an easier way to move cocaine from Latin America to destinations in South Asia, East Asia, and as far afield as Australia. Of course, the further cocaine moves away from its point of production, the more that a criminal group can make from selling it. Now, South Africa is a reasonably well-developed and stable nation, which is important. It has a long coastline with weak surveillance. And you've got port facilities like Durban that handle around 3 million containers a year, and enforcement bodies only have the capacity to look at around 2% of these. So South Africa is in a quite a vulnerable position in one way, but is extremely attractive in another for organized criminal groups, particularly those from Latin America.
So if there are these gaps at our ports on a normal day when things are working well, let's say, how much higher is the risk would it be, rather, when you look at what's happening, for example, now at some of our ports where there's such a massive backlog, where thousands of containers have been stuck at sea. There are queues of trucks waiting to come in and pick up various goods. Does that present a higher level of opportunity for these syndicates to be able to move these drugs undetected?
Certainly it could. I mean, you're talking about a high volume of containers and ships and so it's easy to hide some amount of drugs within that high volume of traffic, and the likelihood of it being detected is much slower in that sense. But on the flip side, delays and inefficient port facilities are not good for business, particularly for the drug business. So it's possible that some groups might look for other places to exploit if that's the case.
And then in terms of combating the crime, we were talking earlier about the police response. Is this the sort of thing that authorities can hope to bring down in terms of its prevalence rather than eliminate altogether?
Well, any talk of complete elimination is fantasy. It's never going to happen. And you've got to remember that the reason that cocaine is the lucrative commodity that it is because it's prohibited. So this prohibition has created the commodity of cocaine and made it so attractive to be moved around. So I think until we perhaps reconsider the way that we look at substances like cocaine, we've got to accept that maybe in a best case scenario we might achieve a minor disruption in markets, but as a whole, cocaine and other drugs will continue to move around the world. Of course, the largest disruption to the global economy in recent memory, the COVID crisis, didn't lead to any significant impacts on these trade flows. So what can law enforcement do that COVID couldn't?
Is the response of global governments coordinated enough in order to respond to this problem? Because when you look at it, there are drugs moving in and out of South Africa from places including Europe, other parts of the African continent, East Asia, so clearly very widespread and across several continents.
Yeah, South Africa very much is a crossroads, as you say. The challenge with global governments is that there is a global action plan run out of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, where a majority of countries around the world have signed up to take a very specific criminalized approach to drugs. But over the last 30 years, it's really achieved nothing. And if anything, drug markets have grown, both in terms of the number of people who use and the number of substances that are available and where they are available. There is now a movement among a smaller subset of countries to really look at different ways of dealing with drugs more broadly. For example, South Africa and its response to cannabis and the way that is being considered. Other countries are doing the same thing with other substances. There's a recognition that the status quo is not working, and alternatives need to be considered if we want to achieve any form of success in terms of reducing the harm caused by illicit drugs and the organizations that are invested in moving them.
Jason, Eligh, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight.